All right, the hot takes for Marvel Rivals returns. My name is KarQ. We took a little break here. I was busy with other obligations, but we collected some more hot takes, some fresh takes from the recent Reddit videos. So let's go through them right now. First take we have is hot take: 90% of the time, healers aren't to blame for you dying. As someone with hours on both tanks and healers, even if my healers could have made a perfect play to get me out of a bad position and didn't, it was my dumbass who got there in the first place. I will say that especially on DPS, you run into a few healers that aren't aware enough of where everyone is, aka can't look up syndrome, but those are pretty rare in my opinion. It's not necessarily a hot take, but 90% feels like a little bit of a stretch. There's certainly times where things are salvageable. Obviously I play a lot of support or strategist, and there's times where I'm like, I totally could have pressed my Loki rune, or I totally could have actually bubbled you and pocketed you a little harder there. It's a lot harder to gauge the amount of damage you're taking as a tank because you are playing looking at the enemy and you don't always have time to look back and see where your healers are. It's nice to, and I recommend all tanks and DPS check where your support or strategists are playing position wise, but you have to be aware of that and play around that as well. For the DPS heroes who are like, in a bad spot, you also have to recognize what type of supports you're playing with. For example, if you're playing a flyer like, Iron Man or Storm or Mr. Johnny Storm over here, and your supports are like Rocket and Loki, for example. Loki hitting an air shot on you while you're strafing and like dodging mid-air is a lot less likely to work compared to like an Adam Warlock who can look and just click you, or like a Luna Snow who can actually just like directly aim at you, for example. So like picking your choice based on what your strategists are playing is also equally as important, or vice versa. Like as a support or a strategist player, you also have to pick the right strategist based on what your team and your tank and your damage heroes are playing. But it goes both ways. I would not say 90% of the time. Okay, next hot take: the responsibility for surviving the dive fails to the support that isn't under pressure. If Panther goes on your Luna, it is your Invisible Woman's responsibility to keep Luna alive. Then it is your duelists and tanks' job to kill the flankers if they overstay. If you keep track of the enemy heroes and know when the Black Panther magics and Spideys are, for example, are going to dive, it becomes much easier to survive their burst damage. A lot of the issues people complain about with dive would be solved by actually thinking ahead a little bit about where the dive is coming from and what cooldowns to save from it. This one's not a hot take at all. These first two takes are pretty reasonable. The responsibility, actually, I would say first and foremost, goes to the support that is under pressure first. If you are the prime target, you A, have to like be aware of where it's coming from, and B, save certain cooldowns that are good for that specific dive matchup. If it's a multi-dive angle, sometimes there's literally nothing you can do except hide. Believe it or not, something I do recommend is like, you play in a spot where like I'm just literally behind like a piece of cover here, and like I will just AFK here because they are also sending 3 people scoping and waiting for me to pop out. If I'm just baiting time for 3 people, I'm quote unquote drawing resources away from the enemy team that could potentially, be diving somebody else. And sometimes like hiding there for a longer time on a hero that gets dove pretty easily and then waiting long enough, they get impatient, they just pick somebody else and then they end up surviving the dive, and then I pop out at the end. That's also a good recommendation, believe it or not. So the responsibility falls on the person first and foremost who is under the most pressure. Sometimes swapping heroes is actually the right play too, forgot to mention that. And then it does go to the other support that isn't under pressure. I actually do agree with this. The other support helping the other support is a big responsibility and a higher priority than like a tank, for example, turning around, or a Spider-Man whose job is to not peel, to like turn around and peel for you. That's not his job. They're supposed to be going for their backline, right? So the flowchart is pretty solid. It obviously still depends on like what heroes you're playing, but this is right. Your other support first, and then if they overstay, then your other DPS and tanks can turn around and punish that position. Good call out. Next hot take: NetEase should avoid the calls to add more tanks and supports into the game at a faster rate to make up the deficit with DPS. New heroes tend to launch in a strong state to make a splash, barring Human Torch pre-buffs, and if too many overpowered vanguards and strategists arrive over the coming seasons, Rivals will likely find itself in a GOATS-like meta that will be hard to shake. All it'll take is 1 or 2 more invincibility granting ults and abilities, and pros will find a way to stack them to create an unkillable meta, worse than the recent triple support phase. Adding more duelist options on a regular cadence will give players more options to break up the tank and support stacks. This is the first take that I disagree with on this video so far. I don't think like NetEase and companies I mean, okay, the armchair theory, or like the theory is that companies like to release their heroes in a strong state so they can sell more skins, but they don't always hit the mark. I would like to believe, maybe this is too like, you know, too optimistic. I would like to believe they try to release them on the quote unquote safer side of strong, but not super OP. And I'm trying to think of the 4 releases. Invisible Woman came out and she wasn't like, she's like really good. I wouldn't argue like super OP, but she was really good. Human Torch was underpowered. Thing actually came out at a pretty reasonable power level, and Mr. Fantastic came out underpowered, believe it or not. So it's not like they're intentionally trying to come out with them being super OP. At least that's my belief. Emma Frost definitely came out on the safer side of strong, if not a little bit too strong. Intentionally holding back on releasing tanks and supports because of a fear like this of like a stack. Like, you have to let people solve the metas and stuff for themselves. You know, I think there's bigger problems to tackle, which is like the discrepancy between the amount of choices you have on the vanguards and the strategists. So like, I disagree with the take that they should not release as many supports and tanks to compensate for the higher level of DPS. You can bump up the ratio. It's not to say to fully ignore the damage category or the duelist category, but like, definitely don't willingly withhold more than needed to. So yeah. Hot take: people spend too much time trying to prove the matchmaker is working against them rather than just trying to get good at the game, or even more importantly, enjoy the game. Right, I've seen a lot of like the theories with like the engagement based matchmaking, which is like, you know, proven in the paper. They may have like a slight, you know, variance in which they'll put like people with like who tend to have like a losing streak on your team if you have lost X amount of games. I dabbled into a little bit, and I actually agree with this take in the sense that, like, is it called a self-fulfilling prophecy, where you look too into it and then you kind of just like fall for the bait yourselves? Like, because you're too hyper aware of like, oh, if I lose 3 in a row, I'm likely to lose the 4th, and you're already like putting yourself in a negative mindset, or in a mindset in which you play different, because it's like, oh, I'm likely going to lose this because the matchmaker is against me, so I'm going to play safer in hopes to win, which it kind of goes against like how you would normally play it, or how you played to get to this rank in the first place. Does that make sense? I use the psychology a lot when people like are in their rank up games. For example, they're 1 game off from hitting their brand new, you know, Grandmaster Celestial game, and then they just psychologically just play safer because they feel like that's better. But then they end up playing too passive, and then they just lose the game because they're just not like doing what they did to get there in the first place. So the same thing with the whole like spending too much time breaking down the matchmaking and theorizing that's why they lose. Like, think about it this way as well. You feel like this is like a loss because of the matchmaking. What about the like, you think this, they're putting like these teammates against you? What is that teammate thinking? They're also thinking the same thing. They're all like, wow, they're putting like this person on my team and he's trash because he's also on a losing streak. So you're all just like pointing fingers at each other instead of just focusing on what you do best. Maybe there's some truth to it, but like when they say there's like they're putting these people against you, it's like very small percentages, but then people blame like that is the exact reason why they lost. It's like, okay, maybe the matchmaker favored you at like a 48% on average to win because you guys are streaking on an L. Like 48% is still doable. They think it's 100% loss because of these people. It's not 100%. It's like, okay, a couple of percentages off if the, you know, if the algorithm's true. That's fine. You can work around that. People with like a 30% win, you can still win like, you know, a third of the time. It's pretty not great, but like it's still doable. So if you like trap yourself in that mindset, you're just more likely contributing to that loss, if that makes sense. So stop focusing on that and just focus on you, more than like, you know, all these little external factors that are out of your control. All right, streaming take. Mr. Fantastic's ult is not the worst in the game, not even bottom 5 worst. I feel like it tends to get kills relatively consistently, and as Loki, I've copied Fantastic just to wipe out healers who can't counter it. P.S. I know this doesn't mean too much, but I'm GM2, so I'm not that low elo. I'm not even a hot take at all. Mr. Fantastic's ult's just been buffed. Like, in what, this recent season 2, he now instantly goes big form when he pops ult, so he's tanky now. And it like consistently bounces and is constant pressure onto people. This ultimate is not bottom. This ultimate's really good now. Like, I would honestly rate it like an A tier DPS ult. It almost secures a kill every single time. And I would know. I've been playing with Mr. Fantastic the past week and around mid GM as well. And it's like mid GM this season, not like last season when it was, oh, everybody's in GM or whatever. Pretty damn consistent right now. 100%. Hot take, voice chat should be disabled competitively in quick play. It's never serious enough to warrant voice callouts in quick play since 90% of the people are just farting around or trying out new heroes. I'm sick of hearing these console players with open mics just mouth breathing with a coughing child in the background while I'm just trying to do a few warm-up rounds before heading into comp. I mean, by default, you can just disable it. You can opt out, but I think keeping voice chat in was like the original idea of a whole like online multiplayer culture. It's you have to blame the community and like the people that you play with rather than like a system itself set up for like big moments and cool plays you can make with random people online. Like that was the original altruistic beauty of playing with people online. And all over the world, wherever you're from, make some callouts, win the game, hurrah! But then, you know, it just takes a few bad apples to ruin it for you. And most people obviously opt now not to talk, but like you can just permanently disable it in your settings. But I do think having it default on is fine. And that should, you know, proximity chat and all that kind of stuff is a fun part of it. But maybe culture is slowly shifting where it should be default off and then you opt into voice chat for the other way around, especially in a complete free-to-play game where there's, you know, kids and stuff playing this game when, like, you know, 9-year-old Tommy is picking up Marvel Rivals because they want to play as Tom Holland as Spider-Man, you know what I mean? Hot take: the devs are so afraid of dive meta because it's not fun for the average player. However, if they in turn just make characters like Black Panther or Iron Fist basically unplayable in higher elos, having to literally use their entire kit to get a drop of blood from the enemy and being countered by a single ability, which is not a good solution. I'm not saying buff dive so it's meta, but just give BP or others a bit more survivability. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a hot take. Like, obviously devs in general want to cater to their largest audience, which is a casual audience, and like, unfortunately for competitive players like you and myself, like that does mean in turn sometimes dive and stuff that is unfun for the average player just gets nerfed quite a bit. I will say Black Panther is kind of like, I've seen a lot more recently, because obviously he was really good in season 0 when they had, you know, they needed like a large sample size of their player base playing the game to get the average sentiment, but they did nerf his survivability because he used to gain a lot more overhealth, right? Or a lot more of extra HP every time you use an ability, and they tuned that down. He does get a little bit right now, but like they have to be careful with tweaking it. I think like numbers wise, like Black Panther uses his movement and then escapes anyways and gets out most of the time. Most of the deaths happen when you overstay your welcome, and that big 450 HP he used to gain from 300 if he uses abilities was enough for him to just stay and still claw at you at melee range even with no cooldowns, which is a bit insane. I think now it's nerfed so he only gains up to like what, 350, 375, which is still pretty reasonable, but like if you don't get your kill, you have to like walk out instead of like overstaying your welcome. I actually don't think Black Panther's that bad at all. I think dive's in a pretty reasonable spot still. It's still getting played quite a bit. You're saying it's not saying buff so it's meta, but give BP and other. I already think a lot of the dive has a lot more survivability than you give it credit for. Magic also has like an invulnerability thing, goes into a portal and can phase and time dodge certain things, and she gets a lot of overhealth when she also pops her buttons. Psylocke can go invisible and just double dash out. It's less about survivability and more about an escape tool, and like all these dive heroes have the movement as their escape tool, and that's their key to survivability. Understanding how much pressure and how much they can withstand before, like, you know, maybe holding on to, like, either you commit to the all-in or you use that movement ability to get out, and that's part of the skill check for these heroes. So I would say do not buff their survivability any more than needs to. They do not need to buff their survivability anymore right now. Hot take: Black Panther is the hardest character because if you miss one dash reset, you are dead. But if you're Spider-Man, you have 3 web swings and his combos are easier. I would say it's harder than Spider-Man in a lot of sense in terms of like gauging whether to commit to the full kill versus escaping. But yeah, Spider-Man, once you get the web swing down, I mean, there's different parts of skill, right? There's also the factor of like, you know, obviously being able to be fluid with his movement. It's kind of like skating or any sort of like, you know, putting on new kind of wheels, learning how to ride a bike with Spider-Man. Once you get used to the movement, he does have more tools to like, you can use his tools to get in and he still has tools to get out, versus Black Panther, sometimes you have to all in all your buttons to commit. And if you don't get the mark or the reset, you unfortunately will be in a really bad spot. So like, it's not necessarily harder, but like, it's a harder judgment or assessment to make, whereas a Spider-Man player can always just commit to the jump in and then just fly out if things are bad. That part's easier for Spider-Man, but maybe harder to kind of maneuver around the map at first, versus Black Panther, who kind of just wall climbs and just sits there, third-person peeks and waits. It's a different play style, so even like the whole idea of being harder is like harder where, you know what I mean? Hot take: abilities that completely halt movement should not be in the game. What? That's like a stun, right? I can be destroying the enemy team where all of a sudden I'll just get completely frozen and effing die, whether I get exiled, sedated, frozen. It's absolute bullshit and completely kills the flow and momentum of the game. I'm fine with an ultimate freezing you, but a regular cooldown should never be able to do that. So you're saying a regular cooldown should never be able to hard CC somebody, but then certain dive and certain heroes go unchecked, and then they just end up becoming like the go-to pick because there's literally nothing to stop them. I call this a necessary evil. It's kind of like Ana with Sleep Dart. As long as like the stun is kind of like a reasonable skill. It's not like just a point and click and I stun them. It's kind of like League of Legends. They have to get rid of a lot of the point and click stuns. A lot of them are like skill shots. Like I think Brand and like Scion and League used to be like a one-click stun in like 2010 back in the day. I remember that. Same with Tarek and stuff. But like they changed it in a lot of senses. So I'm trying to think of like the stuff that's annoying. Like Luna's Sleep Dart or Luna's Freeze is a little harder to hit than people give credit for. Mantis requires like Either you hit it direct or you can splash it on an environment, which you kind of have to play around. I think Hulk's is a skill shot as well. I actually don't think the stuns are like even that bad in this game. Arguably the easiest one to hit is probably Invisible Woman's. It's not even a stun though, it's just a slight knockback. But like you need this to keep these other dive heroes in check. So to me, it just sounds like you're a dive character player, but like there needs to be some sort of way to somewhat counterplay. And like people just don't like when their character gets inhibited, but that's like necessary. You need flow in both oppositions for the game to be fun for all heroes and rewarding for all players, or else you're just going to get 90% DPS players and no one will ever want to queue support. Well, actually tank too, because when tanks get chain CC'd nonstop by easy to hit stuns and CC, it's also very unfun. I've seen this play out before in Overwatch where they had to, you know, cut down on like Mei and all these other heroes that have hard CC for the tank players who just get discorded, slept, frozen, hacked, and it's just not fun. So fine balance between the two, but you do need a little bit of CC in the game. Next hot take is that people are really fixated on Scarlet Witch for being a no skill player or being an accessibility character, but I have perfectly good aim and many hit scan heroes are in my pool. In fact, most of my game time is on Black Widow. Yet Wanda, who I just have lorded, is just fun to me. And it's important to remember that fun is a perfectly good reason to enjoy a character. It doesn't always boil down to a skill issue. I would say this is not really a hot take. That's right. A lot of people in a sweaty competitive game will just kind of like pick at reasons when they get killed. So like somebody who dies, so Scarlet Witch will just all chat you angrily, be like, you're just playing the no skill hero because you're bad. But that's just like their tilted trash talk back at you. But like you're not wrong. Like you can perfectly just play a hero simply because it's fun. A lot of people play heroes when they're fun, even if they're bad meta-wise. Like you just play a bad hero because you just find them fun. And I think that's when you take a step back from the competitive nature of a game and just like think about enjoying games as a person, like you just play stuff that's fun, and I think that's perfectly acceptable as well. Hot take, I love that Rivals has more melee heroes than Overwatch 2, but it feels like half the roster hard counters melee heroes with tons of CC, and you have to switch the hero you like almost every game because there's just like a Bucky and a thing on the enemy team. That's the downside of playing melee heroes. I think that's why Overwatch was really hesitant on adding a melee hero because of CC, which you just one click or sometimes like a very easy skill shot, and then all of a sudden the melee hero is useless. I will argue that the melee heroes in Rivals are actually done really well, and Overwatch should take some notes on how they did it, where they actually have tools to either A, get overhealth and survive a certain onslaught, or B, have incredible movement to either dodge stuff, or C, have like, you know, invincibility buttons. For example, Magic and Portal, Spider-Man can use the team up, and you play it with a specific, you know, team up with Venom to go invulnerable for a second to dodge a skill shot, or you have crazy movement, or you have stealth on Psylocke and you just get in, get out. It's a push and pull. And like I mentioned in the previous take earlier, when you have heroes that have CC like Bucky, like his is like a skill shot aim, it doesn't actually feel that bad. But Namor was a little cheesy because you just have to put down like a squid and then like, you know, it can automatically aim at you. That one probably felt the corniest for the dive heroes, which is why Namor ended up getting banned a lot early in season 0. But with the frozen squid being down, honestly, I feel like the green Hulk one isn't even that bad, and Hulk still gets banned quite a bit, so you don't even see that. So it's just a little bit of tickle. As long as you pressure the squid or wait for it to shoot. Without that Luna team up on the Namor, he's not as bad as it used to be, which is kind of why also Dive has kind of been back this season as well. But no, I would not say half the roster counters melee heroes, but melee heroes do have tools to survive and or escape. So like I feel like it's a pretty good balance of it so far, to be honest with you. Hot take, improving the survivability of Cloak and Dagger ult is a bad way to offset how they nerf the ultimate. I enjoy playing the game in a way that focuses around risk and reward, and prefer a more powerful ability that leaves me vulnerable to counterplay versus a less powerful ability that is very difficult to kill through. What do you mean? The survivability as in it moves faster? Arguably, it's like better in that sense. You say improving survivability, the ultimate lasts a pretty decent duration and you can spread it out, and it's kind of like a change rather than a raw nerf or buff, an adjustment to how you play Cloak and Dagger. For the most part, you never really need to stack 2 lines of your ultimate just because it was just like overhealing more. Like a single line of it is like more often than not more than enough. It's like 250 HP per second, or it's like 220 times the team up healing bonus, which is plenty, which is just as strong as all the other support ultimates. You know, even if it's a faster ultimate now, you can still die to like, as long as it's in a predictable cadence, it's still like not as survivable as you may think. Maybe a bit more time to like get out of the way for Magneto, but like because it's on a predictable 4- cadence, other heroes can still like time things. It's just an adjustment for everybody around. The way it is now is actually a lot healthier than it used to be completely honest with you. There's still a lot of risk and reward with the Cloak and Dagger ult in its current state. Hot take, Jeff is not as bad as people say he is. He's a B tier hero, not C or D. I'm a Jeff main, so I'm definitely not going to be somewhat biased here, but people are either 1, underutilized utilizing his bubbles. Remember, they give a movement speed buff and you have 6 of them. Or 2, using his ult correctly. Not using his ult correctly. People should be using it to focus the tanks or both supports in the backline, or even using it defensively against other powerful ultimates. I actually think every high elo player has now changed their mindset as well. Maybe just your average streamer is probably saying he's bad, but I would argue he's also like mid B tier. And if you're a Jeff main with the Luna team up and you play him in triple support, he's like high A tier, if not like incredibly good. Actually, Jeff is best played as a flank DPS because his survivability is incredible. All the bubbles and the small hitbox and the auto heals and jumps on walls and stuff, or climbs walls, makes him really slippery, and his DPS is super annoying. So if you play him like a traditional support with his like healing water stream, it's actually just weaker as a raw healing output compared to all the other strategists. So you don't play him like that. You genuinely play him as a flank Jeff, and he's like so good. I will say underutilizing the bubble, I agree with this though. A lot of people don't use the bubble to either speed up the teammate or use it as a knockback. For example, you can bump back like a Black Panther mid dash with the bubble. It disrupts it. And also with the ultimate, I do agree with this. Like, I mean, people know to like either grab the biggest group or like grab an enemy, but like using it defensively to pick up a teammate to help them survive is actually like, as long as they're not like flanking in the back in a bad spot when an ultimate comes, like being ready and using it as a defensive ult is actually incredibly smart. It's like if their storm is like, you know, feel the wrath of the goddess, and they're on the way and you don't have your Luna ult or you don't have your Invisible Woman ult, you can literally just eat your team and just sit and fly, go away, and then spit them out when it's over. That part is like incredibly underutilized, so I agree with that. All right, thank you for the takes. Please continue submitting more fresh, up to date, you know, in May 2025, this season takes. I will continue to take them and keep uploading these videos. Good to be back. Peace.